We're speaking with Matt Dalgleish from Thomas Elder Markets. Welcome back, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Ricky.
Now, I thought I'd give you an open mic opportunity, first of all, to talk about the oil price and what that's meaning for farmers, one of their key input costs when it comes to diesel. What's your thoughts on where the global markets are heading?
Yeah, look, we've seen oil prices come back down below $100 a barrel, so that's been a positive after that rally towards the kind of 130 level. There has been, some kind of thought process that, looks like negotiations in Ukraine and Russia are starting to get closer to maybe some sort of a ceasefire or hopefully even the end to the conflict. So I think that's given some kind of hope to the market and it's seen prices come off. And we haven't seen it reflect yet locally, but it does take about a week to flow through. So hopefully into next week we'll start to see those prices heading back below, at least in where I am in $2. But I have seen it, diesel above $3 when you get further out to the remote areas of the country.
Yeah. Well, I noticed the ACCC actually said on that front, when they indexed figures from the past, the global financial crisis got around $2.10. That was the highest in index terms for Australian money. So we are in uncharted territory in terms of fuel prices.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, the thing with the GFC was that we did see, that was kind of pre the crash type thing. And once the crash came, we saw, prices obviously go back down to, much more reasonable levels. So with a bit of luck, this is only a short-lived spike.
Well, Australian cattle and sheep farmers are really running on their luck at the moment. Things are travelling pretty well. Let's look at exports first of all. What are the figures looking like at the moment?
Yeah, so for the February ones, look, not a bad result really for beef exports. We saw, kind of lifted by about 60%, but January was kind of a little bit lower than normal. So the February figures were quite good. South Korea was probably the standout in terms of, they've been pretty good for the last few years and they managed to increase over that time. And also China saw a big kind of gain from January, February, 30% lift, which considering all the issues with China that we've got politically and still abattoirs not having access, the fact that they're still hanging in there is quite good. But Japan was a bit soft, which is our number one destination. So that's not great for us. And also the US has been kind of, dragging their heels for the last year or so. They're down nearly 50% on what they'd normally take for Australia, and that continues through into February. So, on balance, beef was a bit of a mixed bag, but, all things considered, I guess not too bad. But sheep meat exports still going relatively strong, both, for lamb and mutton. The big players there are China and the US, and we don't have the same kind of tensions when it comes to the sheep meat into China that we've seen with beef and the restrictions. So, China's been still, continuing to consume our sheep meat and lamb products. And the US has had, a fantastic year last year and they've kind of started reasonably strongly this year as well. So for sheep meat producers, the signals are pretty strong moving forward as well.
Yeah, China, there might be a bit of a warming in terms of trade relations. By the looks of it, that we're hearing that they might be allowing some barley to sneak in even though there's tariffs on because they just need the food. And I think they've had some shutdowns due to COVID-19. Maybe they desperately need to get some product in.
Yeah, look, there are obviously the issues out of Ukraine and Russia. In terms of barley, combined, that Black Sea region provides about 30% of barley exports to the world. So, and obviously one of those is China. So, without anything coming out of that part of the world, they're going to have to look to alternative sources, and that could mean that they reconsider their approach towards Australian barley, which would be a good thing for the barley producers here.
You mentioned a decline in interest from the US on Aussie beef. It seems odd to me. They seem to be pretty down in the dumps, the farmers there, from what I'm seeing on social media about their prospects for the future. Are they destocking there?
They are. They've been they're in their third year of liquidation. And that's, started off with, obviously, when we get wet season here and the La Nina over here, the reverse in the US is actually they go to a much drier pattern. So they've had a couple of years' worth of drought, and that's kind of started to impact upon their beef production. They've turned into a liquidation phase, 3 years back. So they're pretty much in the middle of their liquidation phase, the kind of depth of it. And, now we've had this add-on of higher grain prices globally, higher fuel and input prices, fertiliser prices. So that's all combined, particularly the higher grain prices because the US are quite heavily feedlot orientated. So that's kind of caused their kind of trading margins to suffer significantly, and that's added to the woes. You've got bad climate and much higher input costs, causing some of the US farmers to consider is this a long-term business to be in.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting one. I know there's been some plant protein announcements. There's a shift on towards that sort of production. I think there's a big manufacturing facility going to come on stream in South Australia, for instance. So we're not going to see a rapid move into that market, I suspect, even though it's good news for our pulse growers.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't think so. We did see, obviously, when those, new or fake meats or plant protein meats, whatever you want to call them, when they came out, there was a bit of an uptick in sales and interest. But I think over the kind of months, people have sampled it, and it hasn't kind of maintained its momentum in terms of sales, whether it's here or in the US or in Europe. It's still chugging along. It's still going to be, I guess, a longer-term viable market. I think the big issue there is the costs. That product is still cost-wise, it's higher than your equivalent kind of meat product for that grinding meat, the mince type stuff that it competes with. So until they get the cost down to a reasonable point, I think it's probably going to just be a little bit of a niche market and not be too much of a take away from the consumption of actual real meat for this point in time. But it looks something to keep an eye on, and it's an interesting kind of developing market space. But I think it's still pretty much a niche player. But a good thing for South Australia that we've got another manufacturing outlet coming that's going to employ some people.
Now, just on the local markets, National Trade Lamb Indicator, first of all, it's not falling as fast as I expected with a lot of lambs coming into the market.
No, that's right. We did see there was a little bit of a hiccup, with regards to yardings through the flood. Not as much impacting upon lamb as beef, but there were some delays in yardings. That's all kind of ironed out now, and both yardings and slaughter for lamb have kind of got back to what you'd consider to be normal levels given the season. But I think we have seen a bit of a sell-off a few weeks back, but in the last kind of week or so, prices have been a bit more moderate. I think one of the things, Ricky, is that we're heading into, or we're a month or so away from heading into that winter period, and traditionally that's when we start to see supply dry up, pretty much completely for certainly for old season lambs, and the new season lambs haven't arrived. So we generally see prices kind of get a bit of support as we get into the latter part of autumn and into winter, and so that could partially be too why we're starting to see those price declines slowly kind of reduce and find a bit of a base at these levels.
Yep, and on the cattle front, as you mentioned, a little bit more struggle when it comes to getting cattle to market, especially in northern New South Wales, southeastern Queensland. But when it comes to the Eastern Young Cattle Indicator, it's a bit like, I've called it beef coin before, like Bitcoin. It's hard to predict where it's going. Is there a chance it might start slipping away? I think you'd made a call previously on Flow that it was going to start declining in this part of the year.
Look, normally it has been stuck for the last probably 6 weeks, in about a 20 cent range. So it's been pretty quiet, the Eastern Young Cattle Indicator. I think that's fairly normal for this time of year. Again, we have started to see that climb towards the top end of that range. So I think yesterday it closed at 11.30 cents a kilo or thereabouts. So that's probably the highest it's been in a number of weeks. It's not a dissimilar situation actually to the sheep side is when we go through that winter period, we do also see a little bit of a climb in the Eastern Young Cattle Indicator. I don't think we're going to see it just yet. I think we've probably got a few more weeks of consolidation, but I'm not ruling out a little bit of a kind of winter drift higher before we start to look. I think we're going to probably more likely probe lower significantly when we get to the latter end of this year, kind of into that last third or last quarter.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine. I know that we're not up at the record levels when it comes to the national herd, but it's hard to imagine people just keep stocking and going up because the ground might be wet, but it's not going to stay wet for long.
No, that's right. I think we've got, obviously this season's pretty good still for the producer in terms of climate and rainfall. Into next year, it's probably likely we go to a more moderate to average kind of season, and then I wouldn't be surprised within say the middle of the decade we're back into some level of a drought. That's the normal pattern I think we're starting to get into. So there's only probably another year and a half for kind of decent quality rebuild to the herd or the flock, and then we might be looking at a stage where we're back in some level of destocking.
All right, Matt Dalgleish from Thomas Elder Markets, another comprehensive wrap. Where can people find out more for free on your website?
It's www.thomaseldermarkets.com.au, Ricky. Jump on that.
Thanks, Matt. Catch you again soon.
Cheers, mate.